Good afternoon. I'm Gail Feigenbaum, the Associate Director of the Getty Research Institute, and I am delighted to welcome you to our program. Today we have a very special occasion, a conversation with Tyler Green, Serge Guilbaut, and the late Henri Matisse. Our conversation today is prompted by the Getty Research Institute's new book, Chatting with Matisse. I'm holding it up, which presents an extensive interview with Matisse that has never before been published. The manuscript of the interview has been in the collection of the Getty Research Institute since the 1990s. It was acquired with the papers of journalist Pierre Courthion, and it was Courthion who conducted the interview with the artist. Matisse at the time was recuperating from surgery during the wartime occupation of France. About a month before the book was to come out, Matisse suddenly decided against publishing. The Getty's manuscript is the final version, incorporating all the corrections and revisions, and ready to publish. An earlier version of the manuscript is held in the Matisse family's archives in Paris. That earlier version was consulted by a handful of scholars, but it has not been published, even in part. I want to express our gratitude to the Matisse family, and particularly to the artist's grandsons, Claude Dutuit and Georges Matisse. Claude Dutuit has passed away, but Claude and Georges Matisse were incredible collaborators. I have to say they cooperated with us with great kindness and generosity, and they allowed us to bring out the interview for the first time. So now Matisse can speak to us across the 7 decades directly and at full strength. We have the intrepid Serge Guilbaut to thank for this project. He spurred us, me, to approach the Matisse family, who had previously been guided by the artist's own wishes to suppress the publication of the interview. Serge has done a skillful job in letting the interview itself do the talking, offering just enough background and analysis, and introducing revealing and relevant new documents. Serge Guilbaut himself requires little introduction, and I will only say that he has recently become emeritus professor at the University of British Columbia, and now he is and will be the author of even more publications, but he can never escape his fame for being the author of the classic best-selling book, How New York Stole the Idea of Modern Art, Abstract Expressionism, Freedom, and the Cold War. Tyler Green needs even less introduction. If you have a computer and you are interested in art, you should, or you ought to, know Tyler Green's blog, Modern Art Notes. His was not only the pioneer of the medium, but it remains, as the Wall Street Journal acknowledged, the most influential of all visual arts blogs. Based in Washington, D.C., Tyler Green is perhaps the most geographically unbound of art critics, whose attention even extends to the parts of the United States that lay to the west of the Ohio River. And since I work for a research institute, I want to point out that although Tyler Green is a powerful online presence, he actually conducts research in libraries and archives. His Modern Art Notes podcasts are important and allow him to explore in depth as opposed to what he himself describes as drive-bys. And most impressively, again in his words, these are 100% about art, not business, not gossip, just art. Please help me welcome Serge Guilbaut and Tyler Green. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. This conversation will indeed be this week's Modern Art Notes podcast, so it will go out on Thursday. If you don't already know the show, it's an hour every week of artists, art historians, authors, curators, and I have a lot of fun with it. You can find it on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and wherever else podcasts are podcastable. So because this is going to go out on Thursday, I kind of have to start with kind of the first thing people will hear when they download it on Thursday, and that is, Serge Guilbaut, welcome to the Modern Art Note. Let's try that again.
Start again, try it.
See, I do this at home all the time. I screw up and I get to erase it and nobody knows but here. Serge Guilbaut, welcome to the Modern Art Notes podcast and welcome to the Getty.
Thank you very much.
So let's start at the very beginning, in 1941. How did this interview come to happen?
Well, first of all, let's be frank about it. It's kind of very strange that we are here doing an interview, just like Matisse and Courthion. And also, I'm the same age as Matisse, so when Matisse did this interview, so I'm getting old. So it's kind of freakish, you know. I mean, the comparison is not. I don't want to be compared like Matisse, of course, but still, it's kind of weird. So, well, the interview is that I was doing some research for a book that I'm finishing now about the situation in France after the war, and I realized that the Getty, I love the archives. We can talk about this later on, the importance of archives. But I was working, and I loved what the Getty has in the archives. So I was working on it, and it was kind of interesting because I could not find exactly what I was looking for, some Americans in France and so on. So then I said, well, maybe I should look at some of the art critics that were working in France, and I saw Courthion, which was kind of rare that people talk about Courthion. He was pretty much forgotten by art historians because he didn't really make a big impact. But I knew that in 1944, for example, he wrote a very long article in France explaining how great Paris was and so on like that, in a tone that, I don't know if you know the tone of the French art historian is quite funny, that they write about La France, like this, very, very flowery and stuff like that. And he was like this. I mean, he made me feel that I was like the god of art, And so, but I said, well, let's have a look at it. And so I looked, and he had some critics, some texts that were kind of original and from the 40s. So I was interested in that. And then I found there is stuff about discussion with Matisse. And I said, what? I never heard of, I didn't know that he was doing this with Matisse. So I asked for that. And the file came with a lot of pages, like a lot of typed pages, but also a lot of corrections and things like this. And then another box was only one document, like a bound document, 180 pages, I think, and it was ready to be printed. It was ready to be signed. You can see it. So that's when I saw that I realized that it was the original thing, and I was all excited about this. But before, also like to show you how important those archives are, is that at the same time I was doing that work, I was also, when you do in the archives, you don't look only for what you are looking for, but you also look what they have to find some weird stuff, because
that's part of the fun.
It's out of the weird stuff that you kind of create something interesting. And I found a file at the Getty that they had. It was like Gloria Herrera, and I never heard of that person. But it was interesting because I was surprised that she had the name of my mother. And also Herrera is the Basque name, and my mother was Basque. And I said, wow, that's interesting. I have 5 minutes before lunch. I'm going to have a look at it. And so they brought those archives. And in the archives, lots of photographs about jazz music in LA, fantastic stuff she had. But they had a little black box like this, all black covered with a very Japanese-like, luster, very beautiful stuff, with a pink knot on top of it, a bow. And so I said, wow, what is this? So you can imagine the extraordinary
Christmas
stuff.
Morning.
It's like essential experience, right? You open the box and like this, and suddenly I was surprised to see that a bunch of color came up, like this, yellow, green, blue, but very violent. And I said, what is this? They're pieces of paper. And I realized after that, there's a letter, it says, that person was Matisse's assistant in Paris in 1952 or 51, and she helped Matisse to make his cuttings. So some of those pieces of paper were the original piece of paper, and I don't want to kind of bow in front of it. I'm not like that. but still, what was interesting is that you could see the original color that you cannot see anymore because it has been protected in that box. And when you go to the museum in Paris, it's all passé, the color are passé, faded. So that to me was a sign, like two things together the same day about Matisse. So I thought, wow, Matisse's finger is on my head. I should do something about that. So that's the way it came about.
So you find this interview. Matisse does it in 1941, and either in late 41 or early 42. He himself refers to this interview as a resurrection, which is an astonishing word for him to use. Why did he refer to this interview as a resurrection, and how should we consider his use of that word?
Well, I don't know how we can use this. I mean, how he used it, I don't know that, but I know that he was very pleased that he survived an operation. I mean, at some point in those days, in '41, in particular during the war.
He's 70 years old.
Yeah, he's 70 years old. So the type of intestine kind of things, in those days they opened it, they don't know where you're going. So he was very scared about this. And so when he woke up, in those days the hospital was a nun. A nun was there taking care of, the institution in a sense, and his bedroom. And so she said that to him, that, when he opened his eyes and he said, "Oh, you are resurrected." And so he kept that word. But of course, he was not a believer, let's put it that way. Right? So for him, but I think at the time when you realize that you're going to die maybe, and you wake up, maybe you change your tune, I don't know.
And so this may have helped him be willing to have this interview that takes place over the course of 9 conversations, the subject of which spans not just his entire career, but his entire life.
Yes.
From when he's born in the north of France to trying to figure out what he's going to do for a living. He and his father have all these conversations about that, which he recounts, and it goes right up to 1941 when he has the interview. So you got to work with the interview and to read it and edit it. Was there anything in particular in the interview that changed your understanding of Matisse or his work?
No, because I understand Matisse very well. No. But it's because not really. It doesn't change completely your understanding of Matisse. But what you do is that you realize how smart the person was, and also how some parts are extraordinary is when he describes the way he works. That's kind of new, in particular when he talks about color, the way he uses color, the way he needs to be bored in a sense in order to let himself think, and then when he's so bored, then he explodes and something comes out and he goes. All those things are quite interesting and different from what we used to know, because it's like always the same thing with artists, not with art historians, by the way, but with artists, we always kind of idealize those people, and we say, he came, and no, he explains that the difficulty to produce something, the process of creating, and is difficult. And he never used rarely creation, because creation is like God, right? So it's hard, it's work. It's like he's trying to understand, to have access to the person he's looking at, and also to a public that he wants to have, because he always says there is no artist without public, right? And that's a kind of very important key. That makes a difference between him and a lot of artists who are always talking about the fact that, art comes from the inside, and it's all for me, and He says, those are kind of losers, right?
Are there any artists of Matisse's generation who talk about the struggle to make work, the fight to make work, as much as Matisse does?
No. I don't
it's kind
think
of astonishing.
Yeah, but because Picasso, for example, always says that he does, just like that. He does it, it comes out just really. He doesn't say that it comes out from the guts, but he says, I'm thinking about it for a long time, and so he doesn't really talk about this, about the process. So but this is rare. I mean, this interview, that's what's interesting, that he spends so much time to explain, because I think he realizes that he's close to death, right? And so apparently when he started to talk at the hospital to Skira, who was passing the publisher who came and to say hi, apparently he saw that Matisse could not stop talking. It's a little bit like me now, like blah, 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 all the time. And he was a little bit scared. I mean, he thought he had some problem after the operation. But apparently, so that's when he said, would you like to do an interview with me or with us, and we can publish it, right? And he said yes at that time, because I think he was so happy to be able to talk about his past. And he said, if I died yesterday, nobody would know about all this life that he thought was quite interesting in terms of relationship with the art world, relationship with power, with collectors and all that stuff. So he thought it was like a very important thing to do. The problem was, how do you do it?
And Matisse, this is 1941. Matisse would live another 13 years. He'd live until 1954.
Cool.
So he ended up he ended up doing fairly well for the next 13 years. He ended up making it for quite a while.
I like that side.
So Picasso doesn't do these type of confessional struggle of creation interviews. And I don't want to overgo into Matisse-Picasso because the Matisse-Picasso binary has been done a lot. And we forget there was also Braque, who was a friend of both, and Bonnard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they're the only two artists of that generation in that place. But they are the most discussed artists of that time and place for a reason. They're both pretty great. How did they have different relationships with the idea of doing these long format interviews? I mean, it seems to me that Picasso, especially maybe in his last 20 years, had a couple of go-to guys he would go to when he had something he wanted to say that he knew would be recorded for posterity. How did Matisse work in that respect?
He didn't have too many interviews later on. Later on, Courthion, after this problem with Matisse, when Matisse said, I don't want to publish it, in 52, and 49 and 52, he still published about Matisse, but he cannot use the interview, right? That was forbidden, so he doesn't, but he talks about Matisse all the time, and he's trying to do that. Matisse had also a very good connection with Aragon, the poet, after the event of 41, after the war, right? 44, 45. Aragon, and which is quite funny, right? You see how complex this art scene in France was. Matisse, as a friend, Aragon is in the Communist Party, and Picasso is in the Communist Party, but he can't stand Aragon, right? So you see the complexity there. So Aragon wrote 2 volumes on Matisse, right? Letters, beautiful illustrations and articles and all that stuff. Thériade was another one, and so several people wrote about Matisse. Picasso had another type of connections. He was a connection with the British art historians, also photographers, and so he knew how to deal with his personality, and Matisse, for example, they were living in the same area, right, in the south of France, Nice, Simiers, and so on. But for example, Nîmes, also Picasso would go there, and he would be received like if he was the president of the Republic. I mean, he would drive in the city in his convertible car, and like this, like the Pope, and everybody, all the kids were coming, and everybody, he would shake hands and stuff like that. Matisse, you see Matisse is sitting in an armchair, and he looks like a monolith, kind of. He has a kind of a cover like this, a hat, and he's like this. I mean, so totally different kind of
much older
personality.
Man too. Yeah.
But I didn't answer your question about the books and the criticism or something. I didn't
well,
know.
do you think that Picasso and Matisse had different ways in which they, Picasso was happy to give interviews and had a couple guys he liked to go to a lot. Matisse maybe less so?
That I don't know.
No?
No, I didn't see. But Picasso never had very long stuff.
That's true.
He's more like a media relation, right? He talks to media and he says, "Hey, have you seen how great I am?" and so on, or jokes, and very smart. I mean, those 2 guys were very, very smart and very interesting, and a parallel life. They crossed once in a while, sometime to fight and sometime to be very nice, and both of them admire the other very much, because Picasso always said, I cannot do what Matisse does. I mean, those kind of very fantastic kind of balanced shapes and form. I mean, the guy, I don't know how he does it. And Matisse was saying the same thing. I cannot do what Picasso, this violence, the irony. I mean, I cannot really do that. So they had dinners once in a while, but not too much, though, because it's good when you are kind of good friends to stay apart before you fight, So they had this kind
Save
of
your fights for
life.
canvas. So let's turn a little to the substance of the interview. This might be Matisse's most extended discourse on the importance of the Louvre to his work, especially at the beginning of his career. Was there anything in the interview that particularly interested you about how Matisse talks about the Louvre?
Well, yeah, it was surprising to me, because I'm not a specialist of the early 19th century, so maybe people know more about that than I do. But What I thought it was kind of interesting is that I knew that the academy was something that was very strong in France. Still strong. France, the École des Beaux-Arts, you have to learn certain things, and that's it. So in those days, you had to learn how to draw first, then you had to put the color first, and then you go to the Louvre, you see the masters, and you copy the master. You really have to copy. So there he describes, in a very nice way, this world of academic world. That was quite interesting.
That he came up into.
He came into, but how do you say that? Yeah.
He wanted to elbow his way out of it too,
Right.
even as he was coming up into it.
He was
he
dragged.
knew
You
he
had to drag
do it.
him. He was dragged. He was dragged into it. But Moreau was one guy, one prof that was very different from the others in the academy, though, because Moreau was not producing pictures like the traditional academic, like Bouguereau, very clean cut, very detailed, and so on. And also he was a little bit crazier, like a crazy, dreamy, and all that stuff. And he wanted the students not to follow him, but to follow themselves. And also he would say, you go to the Louvre to do copies. They were doing two things. They were doing two different things. The students going to the Louvre, they would would stand up in front of a painting and actually copy the pictures, the painting. It took a while. And then to learn how the master was doing this, and then in order to sell it too. So they could sell those copies in order to make a living, right? It was like a university kid now who gets a grant, There was something like that. And Matisse never sold one, though. So the people didn't think
Tried,
it was
though. He
the
certainly
copy.
tried.
He tried, yeah, but they didn't see it was a good copy or something. I don't know, because it was a little bit different. So what Moreau wanted was the students to go there and to look at the master, but not to copy exactly what they've done. Is to discover yourself as a student. So that was really interesting for Matisse and for few students around Matisse also to talk about this, right? To realize that they were different. And apparently he describes when Moreau left, then the class changed also, and it became more classical or traditional, because the point of doing that stuff at the Louvre was to get what they call le Prix de Rome, right? So a lot of those artists and profs were saying, like, you have to kind of get this grant to go to Rome, to go to see the real big artists, and once you go there, you'll realize how great they are, and you copy.
Because the big artists aren't at the Louvre.
Big artists.
I mean, it is kind of, Matisse pokes fun throughout the interview at the idea that you had to leave Paris to see the big artists.
I know.
He just thinks it's so academically nuts.
Yeah, Was he right?
He was totally right.
Well, yeah. It's just like now. I'm sorry, it's a parenthesis. It's just like now, and we don't say that anymore. But it's like in the '60s, you have to say you had to be in New York in order to be an artist. It's the same thing. So, just a parenthesis. But now we don't have in the center anymore. So
it's also amazing that here's an interview, 1941, and he can remember the exact paintings he was copying at the Louvre 40 and 45 years before. And not only can he remember them, he can say, well, here's this little Chardin about the size of a piece of paper, and here's why it's so great, and here's exactly how Chardin made it. I mean, his memory for this stuff, perfect.
But because those things they really mark you as a student. You have to remember when he went to Paris to studying. He didn't know anything about art and paintings. He never seen. Right? He lived in the north of France in a tiny village, and so it was like everything discovery. So, and to be interested in Chardin at that time is even weird. I mean, it's kind of strange. He was not that popular in those days. It was more like Delacroix or Ingres or something like that. So yeah, he was always like that. He always had some kind of a quirky, would say, like, he was kind of strange. He didn't fit like the others, I guess.
There's one painting. One of the strange things about the interview, at least to me, is that Courthion does not ask Matisse about very many specific paintings. They just kind of banter about broader influences and broader experiences. But one of the paintings they do specifically discuss is Matisse's great 1907 Blue Nude.
Yeah.
And they talk about how it kind of came out of Matisse's studies at the Louvre with Moreau. And I wonder...
Yeah, well, this one is... it seems to me it's complicated. It's fun, actually, all this. people don't talk too much about this picture. They talk a lot about that picture because it was the one that was considered as a horrible and disgusting and all that stuff, in the academic and in Paris at the time. But the way it was done, you arrive there, it's kind of interesting because Matisse was always interested in so-called, we'll talk about that later on, I guess, but about a trip, about traveling.
Yes.
But at the same time, he hated it. But he thought he had to, so he had to see the world and stuff like that. So he did this. And he went, you have to remember also, we are talking a time when France was a colonial power, right? So he went to the Sahara Desert, visit some places, and in Biskra,
in North Africa.
In North Africa, he stopped and he produced this picture. And after he produced a picture, but after having an experience with a sculpture women, a naked woman, because I'm sorry to say, but Matisse was really interested in women. All right, we always talk about Picasso, but Matisse was even worse. I mean, so, but that we can cut that out of the if you show it to the family,
Oh no, that'll stay.
No, but he was. I mean, in those days, a male was really interested in hunting, he felt, I mean, both of them felt like this, right? And in particular in the avant-garde groups or in the bohemia groups, right? It was like that. So when he goes over there, he's fascinated by, in Biskra, he's fascinated by a tribe that is live there, and they are all dressed in very long blue dress, tented, and they also give their kids for prostitution, young girls, right? Very young. And that blue, nobody talks about the blue, but the blue is actually the fact that the stain of the dress is on, it's not very stable. So the body, the black or kind of black girl, is also with the blue reflections, and he loved it.
Hence, right? Blue nude memory of Biskra.
Blue nude Biskra and so on. So what he's talking about that is young prostitution, that's what he's talking about, and desire for that. So I don't know if he experienced it, but that's what he's talking about. And what is interesting is that if you look at art historians often don't do this because they talk about what they see, but they don't talk about the context. And if you go into the context, you realize it was very popular in those days to send postcards from North Africa about women, prostitutes, who are kind of, they show their breast and they send a kiss to the person who's going to receive the postcard, and behind the soldiers say, hey, I got that one, and so on and so forth. So Matisse, he knows exactly what he does, what he produced, this picture. Unconsciously, when you look at this, it's a little bit like when the first group of people went to see the Manet picture of the Odalisque, like the lady on looking at you, she's a prostitute. People understood right away.
Olympia.
Yeah, Olympia. So that was kind of a scandal. And with that one is exactly the same thing. And the way, if you look at it, maybe a bit too far, but because I do analyze pictures not only on the form, but also what the forms mean in the unconscious, right? And you can see on this one is that the body is twisted like this. So like that, you have access to frontal view on top and the back, nice back, right? The derrière, as we say, right? And so you have both of that. The desire is doubled by this breaking stuff. And he learned this idea when he dropped a sculpture that he was doing in clay. And he was all upset, and then he was on the floor, and then he says, oh.
It fractured the two.
Yeah, he fractured, he turned, he said, oh, I have both, wow. And so he produced this stuff. And when you look at the back, if you have time to look at this picture, at the back you have two shapes like this with, it looks like a coconut tree, like leaves like that.
Or date palms, yeah.
But yes, but when you look the way he put it, just look carefully.
Oh, he uses in the background of the tree, he uses the coconut trees or the date palms or whatever they are to frame the curves of the model in the foreground.
And
I mean,
you can
it's
see
remarkable.
What he says,
It's interesting because in the interview, Matisse seems to take pains to relate the blueness of Blue Nude to the blue in Chardin's painting Pipe, or the Pipe.
Yeah.
Kind of a very different origin story.
Yeah, that's one thing that we have to be careful. We never trust what an artist say, of course. I mean, of course, that's the role of an art historian, to say, okay, all right, that's your version. Let me see what you are hiding, what you don't want to talk about, and so on and so forth. So yes, but I agree. He's a very good formalist in that sense. Say, oh, it comes from this, from that. And yes, but what did you do with this? Monsieur Chardin would never do a double thing,
It's it's two of the best pages in the interview, and yeah, it's really one of the other things Matisse does a great job of in the interview, all 9 conversations, is he discusses his artist friends from before he was Matisse, from the late 1890s, the early 1900s, and he talks about his friends Albert Marquet, André Durand. Were there any of Matisse's particular stories or interactions with his artist friends that interested you in the book?
Well, it is interesting, the beginning of his life when he arrives in Paris, because that's what the interview is good, is that you can learn, when you learn from the lifestyle of the Bohemia groups. Yes, so that's quite, but you learn that they were very suffering because they didn't have any money, but also that they were, like, he was 21, right, 21, 22, so he had a good time. So he describes a little bit of this, but when he says good time, he's not, nowadays, with vodka, is not, it's a lot more fun now than then. And but for example, he talked like one story that to show how kind of young he was, he described that story about he's on this first floor of his studio, whatever, and he's bored, and he used to have like I don't know how to say that.
Oh, like a blowpipe.
Yeah, blowpipe, and throwing some dirt or something.
Clay pellets or something.
Clay, like this, paf, jump. In particular, he was like targeting the hats, the top hats of the guys who were walking like this, and paf, chop, poof. So and he was hiding, and he says that one time he got caught because he looked at this wonderful, in those days, the fashion, the fantastic hat and very nice, how do you call that? The décolleté, like you can see the flesh and so on. He was like. And this lady got it, paf, and she looked at it, and he was like caught, and so he got censored by the guy who rented the studio.
His landlord was not thrilled.
So he remembers that, right? So I guess we should talk about it because it's not very important, but it's just to create the sense, the atmosphere for him to act like this. He was really anti-establishment, right? He was anti his father, who wanted him to be a lawyer, right? So to do that for him was liberating. So.
I think that so often when we think of Matisse, we think of a hyper-serious painter guy, and that story kind of points to that he was not always so.
Yeah.
But I think we often forget how, there's this false idea that things always came easily for Matisse. He tells that famous story that is so often misinterpreted about how he wants to create paintings that make you just feel like you're sitting there in a comfortable armchair, which is one of the most mistold stories in art history. But there's a great story Matisse tells on page 58 of the book that I was hoping you could read for us. And it's a story that details how poor he was, how hard it was for him to sell paintings when he was getting started, and that kind of, at the end, kind of communicates his joy at having, well, maybe I should just let you tell the story.
So the 58, right?
Yeah, bottom of 58.
Oh, bottom of 58, yeah. Yes, okay. So do you want me to read it with a real French accent or my real French accent? I could say, Level go to my place and said, that's good, how much is that? No, okay. All right, so then I took it back because no one would buy it, a painting. Level came to my place and said, a guy, Level, he wasn't his name, came and said, well, that's good, how much is that? I said, 400 francs, just like that. I have no idea why. After all, I was convinced that he'd seen it somewhere for less. Level came back with the director of the Gaz de Paris, which is kind of an industry, and his wife to see the painting. Then he bought it. He gave me 400 francs. I found myself with 4 100 francs notes in my hand. I couldn't believe it. Then I started having scruples and wondering, is it really worth 400? Did I cheat him? And all of a sudden, there was Charles Guérin knocking at the door, a friend of his. I still had the 400s in my hand. He came in. Okay, fine, thank you. And I put a 100 franc note on the floor. Move back 1 meter, put down the second note, another meter, put down the third, 1 meter farther on, the fourth. Charles trod carefully on each one, then suddenly looked worried and asked me, "Have you killed someone?" So it was a feast. I mean, for him, but I think it's interesting this idea that see right away he knows the market, right? And when he says, "Did I cheat him?" You know. And of course, that's what they do all the time. The artist is in the market, right? So you always cheat something on somebody. I mean, you know that you have done that in 5 minutes, and you say, $3,000, and so they say, "Oh, I want it because it's it's going to give me a beautiful image of myself, so I'll pay anything," right? So he knows from the beginning at that time that was the case. By the way, at the same time that we are talking about this, they had a moment in 1900. A group of people, rich people, but smart people. Rich people are not always smart, but I mean those were smart. And they bought a Picasso, Matisse, Camoin, Derain, all these kind of avant-garde kids that were not well known at all. They bought them, and in 1914 they sold it again in the market as a free market. What do you call that? When you can buy by
auction, or
it's a kind of an auction like that, yes. And they quadruple their money. I mean, it was very well known at that time. That was the first time that people realized that those so-called avant-garde crazy people are actually worthwhile because they can sell their work for a lot of money. See, that's what all the story of Matisse and all this stuff is, that describing that kind of art world, the world we are living in.
He spends, one of the real surprises to me in reading the whole interview was how much Matisse talks about his relationships with dealers, with the art market, and Courthion throughout is wowed by how much Matisse seems to know about the market and dealers and the way the market and dealers work and treat him and treat each other. And did that surprise you? Or?
No, because that's when an artist becomes on that level, I mean, you have to kind of know all this. Like Picasso was absolutely superb on this. Picasso is the one who was able to, better than Matisse, but he was able to be in the Communist Party after the war, right, in 1944. He was the one who had a gallery in New York, Samuel Coates. The communists in those days in America, you could not talk about it. Right. So he had a top French dealers, but also he didn't allow anybody or even his dealers to sell whatever. He was controlling, he understood the numbers and so inflation, I mean, all that stuff. So that he was even better in that sense than Matisse.
One of the most interesting things about the interview to me was the way Matisse talks about his relationships with André Derain and Malliol and how they evolved between the beginning of his career and this point in 1941 and 42. Could you, I guess, kind of quickly summarize what Matisse's relationship was with those two guys at the beginning of his career and then at this point in 1941?
What is interesting is that during the period of the Fauve, they are all together, right? A good group.
1905, 1906.
1905, some people from Le Havre coming into Paris and mixing up with them, and they produce this group, and they become suddenly successful. And they are a group of artists who are, I mean, pretty much a pain in the neck of the establishment, right?
The wild beasts.
Yeah, wild beasts. But what is interesting is that they are already very different. Like Matisse comes from some kind of upper middle class group with certain type of idea about what life is about. And Vlaminck was totally the opposite, who lives in a chateau outside of Paris in a tiny village, and all he wants to do is to drive bicycles and being like he would be like a punk now, kind of stuff like that. And so it kind of doesn't fit. But for that reason, because of the same group, they got together and so on.
They traveled around France together.
They go in the south of France.
Paint next to each other.
Right, yeah. They go in the south of France also to see the light and so on, so to speak. And the problem is that in 1940, during the occupation of France, there is the German government, the Nazi government, wanted to have a trip of artists from Paris to Berlin, and some of them do go. So Derain and Vlaminck, they go, and Matisse refused to go, and so when they come back and at the liberation, all those people are kind of rejected, right?
As collaborations.
Collaborations and terrible stuff. So they didn't speak to each other anymore. But I was going to say something about that too, that trip. Oh yes, so it's in 1941 when the interview happens. That's when he criticized a little bit some of those people, right?
You bet.
Because he knows that the moment is quite important, and for him, he's going to be able to be different from them. But at the same time, he knows that he cannot say a lot of things. He knows 46. At the time, he lives in the south of France, like in Nice, but he doesn't know where his wife is. His daughter is in Resistance. He has no clue. He doesn't know. So he doesn't talk too much about the politics, right? Because for him...
He suggests them a lot.
He suggests, yeah, but he doesn't really go into that at all. And it's only afterwards that he realized his daughter was in a camp, and it's a terrible story. But
and throughout, in the interview, you see him talking so fondly about Mayol and Derain.
Yeah, Mayol. So the Mayol story is interesting because at that time we have during the occupation, you have two types of art that is being pushed in Paris. One is the French school, but at the same time, kind of a nice French school, right? And Mayol represents this. And then you have Arnaud Breker, the sculptor from Nazi Germany, who produces huge men, he's always very macho soldiers, like Greek sculptures and so on.
Pushed by the German government.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, pushed by Arbetz and so on. And Mayol is the one that the German like very well. I mean, the Nazi, I should not say German, the Nazi like very well because it's the opposite. It's all the female rotundity, round shapes, and so on. And the Germans actually and a French writer actually said at the time he wrote, and he said that Mayol is great because he looks like France, France is like a woman, Marianne, who gives her body to the Nazi. And we make love to her, and we are proud and happy that we have this orgasm with the Nazi. So the guy, he was caught at liberation, he was killed right away. Right? You could not say stuff like that in the liberation. So they have to be very careful about what they say. And so when Matisse, in 1940, even after the war, 44, 45, Matisse had a tough time with Picasso because at the end of the war, when the liberation comes, there is a fund that is created to protect and to help Mayol because he's a bad financial situation. His health is not good. He's very old, and he was the prof of all that generation, right? So Matisse signs a petition to help Mayol, and Picasso is absolutely furious. And in the archives of Picasso, you have a letter where he actually screams at Matisse, how can you don't understand, you are stupid or what? And Matisse answers, well, but I didn't know what to do, but he was my prof, and he's old, and so he wanted to kind of pass his past, but Picasso, absolutely not.
Matisse had no such compunctions about dropping Derain. He's really quite harsh on Derain, particularly.
Well, yeah, but he was not his prof.
That's true. Yeah.
And he was not old.
Right.
I like that.
Right. The we mentioned the market a moment ago, and there was one thing I wanted to ask. There's kind of a special section in the book after the 9 conversations about Matisse's relationship with the big American collectors.
Oh, yeah.
And in particular, he talks about Barnes and the Rockefellers. Could you give us a quick glimpse of what Matisse says about Barnes, what he says about the Rockefellers, and if you think that maybe that's some of why he blocked the publication of the book, if maybe he thought he'd gone too far in what he said about them? Well,
but in the first place, what I wanted to publish is like not only the full interview, but also what is interesting is that Matisse wanted to reject a lot of at first he let himself go and he talks, and then he reread the thing because it was like they had a stenographer who took notes and then it was typed. And then he read the thing, he said, oh my God, I've said all this stuff. So he cut all kinds of stuff that was kind of pushed aside. And I didn't know about those. It's just by going to the archives in Paris that I found them. And then I said to the family, I said, can I publish this? Look, this is very interesting. I mean, two major things that were rejected by Matisse was his description of America and the description of the wife of a socialist deputy, French, Samba, who was a collector of Matisse. Both of them were really horrendous. And so I said, to really know the guy, I mean, we should publish this. And right away they said, oh yes, it's going to be fun. So,
oh, good.
So
what does he say about America?
I was surprised because I thought, I'm going to have to kind of be a diplomat and I'm very bad at this, But no. Oh, great, yeah, well, go ahead. So about America is like he goes there and he has a description. He talks a lot about the way, the difficulty he had, but that is more technically about the dance, La Danse, when he paints that for the Barnes Foundation. It was a very difficult situation because of the shape and the light, so he gets all kinds of trouble with that. But after that, he has some pages about dinners that he had with the collectors, and it's a really, for him, it's very different world than France. I mean, it's very the upper class of New York and so on that invite him. And so apparently they say, he described this, I don't know if it's true, but he says, well, they ask me, who do you want me to invite, for the dinner we're going to have? So he said, well, I don't know. So he started to think about intellectuals, writers, and so on. And when he goes to the party, there's nobody there. There's only nice girls.
Yeah, no intellectuals, no writers.
So he said, what? I mean, so he described that. He said, the Americans, they think all we want is girls and young ladies and so on. So that was one thing. But of course, also when he describes the collectors, he says they have no clue of what they are buying, why they are buying it. They have no understanding of the art. He said, and look, they even put art in their bathrooms, right? So for him, that was totally to lunch, right? So what he's talking about now is a difference about an aristocratic world of Paris and an upper middle class kind of, very upper class, nouveau riche kind of stuff. So that's what, to him, he did not really understand it. But I think there is a little bit of anti-Americanism there because who do they think they are? I mean, you have to remember until 1956 or 7, let's say, for a French guy, America was cowboys. Cowboy land, right? That was it. And so that's why they were so shocked by Rauschenberg.
And Matisse also seems to delight in telling a story about how he met Rockefeller and complimented him on his collection of Asian art while taking a little dig.
Right. Well, because also he thought, but he liked the collection. He thought the collection was very beautiful and so on. But they just let them like that or whatever, something like this. Yeah, he was really self-centered, Matisse, right? And he always said, in order to be a good artist, you have to be self-centered. You have to kind of be. He used the word narcissistic. You have to be. If not, you cannot be an artist. So.
But Matisse did.
So he was.
There's this great section on Matisse coming to America, which he did. Picasso, for example, never did. And one of the conversations in the interviews, the 8th conversation, in fact, is almost entirely devoted to Matisse, the world traveler. Which is kind of astonishing because Matisse was a good bit older than Picasso. Matisse always believed he was in poor health, really, whether he was or not. There were 2 world wars, and somehow Courthion gets him going on talking about his travels.
Right, but this business of health that's an old story. I mean, from the beginning,
really funny.
Matisse always think that he's dying, he's sick. He's like. He has always problems, and the doctor say, well, no, he's kind of normal, but I have a pain here, and I can see I'm dizzy and all the time like this. And I think psychologically he was unbalanced, and that's why he talks about his wife all the time as the person who actually brought some balance in his life. So that was quite important, and repeat that over and over again until he get a divorce. But well, I mean, you cannot be balanced all the time. I mean, so. Yeah, So what was the...
So Matisse's travels, what do
Oh,
you
the
think
travel,
in that 8th conversation, what do you think we learn about Matisse and his travels and whether he enjoys them or not and what he gets out of them?
Well, what we learn is that how difficult it was to travel. I mean, the guy...
mechanics of travel for Matisse at this point are...
I mean, it takes like several months to take the boat and to go to, Melanesia or to have on the island of the Pacific and so on. And so he doesn't explain what he's doing during all that time, but he gives the number of days or months to go on those trips.
How long it took him to get there.
Yeah.
And he didn't make it easy on himself. He wasn't shy about kind of stopping at places on his way.
Yeah. So he went to America, he went to the Pacific Islands, but he also went to Morocco, and so he was trying to see what was going on there. So what we learn is not so much about the country itself. He doesn't talk too much about the country,
no.
But he often he talks about his board, as I was mentioning at the beginning. This is boring place, he says, right? And in particular, and I think the text by Yves Limbois is very interesting about that because he explains that Matisse say that this is a boring place, and so he describes like he's waiting and nothing happens and so on. It's only 10 years later that all this experience comes back and he produces incredible images of luxuriant environment and flowers and stuff like that. All that has been packed into his mind, and he let it go afterwards.
He also talks about his working process when he goes to Tahiti, how he considers his working process not just arriving on the island on a Monday, sitting down in front of a canvas on Tuesday and beginning to paint and draw on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. He talks about how he gets to Tahiti and he wants the listener, Courthion in this case, and the reader he supposes will read it, to think of Matisse simply being in Tahiti and taking it all in while he's there as part of his working process, as hard work. Even and that he, I don't, how long is he in Tahiti? 3 months. And for the first 6 weeks of it, he's not touching a brush, not touching a pencil, anything. He's just and how he thinks of that as part of it.
But that is also his technique when he's in Paris, right? When he does a painting of a nude woman, because he had a lot of models, and he picks one, and he has to. For a long time, he just play around, but he doesn't really. So he captured. He's trying to see who she is. How he relates to that person, how and what he wants to the public to see through his drawing, or painting, who she is and how he feels. So it's all very complicated. And so he waits, and then suddenly he does that stuff. And he looks like he's like a chess player, into those things. But when he goes to Morocco, for example, he produces incredible pictures, very fantastic pictures. The light is extraordinary, but the same process. He waits a long time. And what is interesting about the Morocco stuff is that you can see that he's bored for long because he has a series of drawings about himself. We published one about himself making the drawing in front of this beautiful mosque, like the village and so on. But you realize the guy is like, oh God, what am I doing here? Kind of, there's no, and the drawing is like this kind of. He likes that stuff,
Throughout his life and career, he talked about how boring and dreadful that trip was, but it produced some of his most. I think that work isn't as well known. And certainly not in the United States as it could be, because the best of the Morocco stuff that's in the United States is hidden away at the barns.
Right.
And the rest of the best of the rest of the best of that stuff is in Russia, and it hasn't been seen in the West since at least 84.
And that's a connection with Russia that he had also was quite important, and he talks a little bit about this. But he has a long chapter about Stravinsky, and he made some...
Matisse, a great violin player, a passionate violin player. It was particularly fun to read that passage.
And his son also played piano. I mean, the violin, and his daughter piano. But to me, I was very impressed by this passage where he described his experience with Diaghilev and Stravinsky, and not very nice one, but he describes the way that those guys function, right? And it's quite extraordinary because he's not like a painter, a musician, or you wanted to have the decor. So Matisse is going to paint the decor, but he changes every 5 minutes. So Matisse has to kind of, he's like Cartesian, right? I mean, he's French, so he thinks that he has to be kind of very, and it doesn't work like that, right?
Diaghilev, Matisse presents his story of his interaction with Diaghilev, the creator of the Ballet Russe, in a most extraordinary way. Matisse presents himself as having been duped into working for Diaghilev.
Yes. Well, but he always does that. He always, he said that about the Barnes also. Of course, he loves
That's
it,
true.
but he
That's
said,
true.
well, I don't know, That's, I guess, I don't know if it's because he's insecure or it's because he wants to raise the price, of the...
But he wasn't
knows?
really getting paid much to work for Diaghilev.
Well, he was,
But-
and trips and, stuff.
Well, that's true. And he did get to spend 6 weeks in, London, was it?
London, where they were working. But what is interesting also is to see when you see the decor and at the same time the costumes. It's fantastic. I mean, the things are, and you can compare because Picasso also worked for Diaghilev also, so you can see the difference. And I think Matisse, in terms of costumes and decor, is way more interesting. Very. I mean, extraordinary, because he listened and he learned very well about the text of the play or the opera, and I mean he goes really into it, and he has a sense of, he can play with the volume, the color, the intensity of the relationship between the shape and the color on the stage. He can play all that stuff. So for him, what he describes, and I think he's right, when he designed a costume, he knows that the costume is going to move around the stage and confronted with another costume, so he plays those colors and shapes. I mean, they kind of play to each other. So that's a little bit what he does in his paintings, right?
Which he explored in the Morocco paintings in
as
particular.
well,
You mentioned in 1910 and 11 Matisse's relationships with Russian collectors, one in particular. This interview is, I think, almost certainly his most extended discourse on that relationship and how important and pivotal that relationship and certainly that money was to him in 1910 and 11.
In particular with the Shukin,
Yes.
and because he wanted to have a dance. He was very impressed by the dance picture. So, but the problem was that Matisse, the dance is a beautiful picture, like red bodies, blue background, and the earth, and they dance around. I mean, it's very well organized, the pressure and the movement. You feel the movement. So what he wanted to do was like to put this on top of the stairs. Like the Shukin, they were before the Communist Party, so those guys were ritzy prince, right? So you had this fantastic house with the stairways like this, and then one. And so the idea was like the wife would come down the stairs all dressed up when you have a reception, and everybody would whoa like that because the costume and so on. But so he wanted to have that the dance, and Matisse thought, okay, so I'm going to do it in a way that when you walk the stairs, you're going to move with them, like as if you are dancing, and so it's going to be light, and you're going to fly and so on. But the first time the Shtukin saw the thing, he was very upset about it because they were all naked.
Nude women.
And nude women.
Nude women.
And he had a 5-year kid, I think.
Shukin had just adopted a young girl.
Yeah, so
Shukin had lost a son who had died, I think, and to make up for it as he
So
talked
for him
about.
it was like, so they had this. And then Matisse had to really convince him, and so it
And
accepted in
Shukin
the
also
end.
says you have to understand Moscow is Asia, and that's why I can't have nude women in my house, because in Asia you can't do that.
Yeah, right, yes.
And
yeah.
Matisse goes along with it.
Right.
And it ends up being probably his most important early
work.
sale,
Yeah.
and his most important,
Yeah.
along with the Stein's relationship with the collector,
Right.
is how. The other major book on Matisse's talking and writing about his own work is a book called Matisse on Art. It was edited by Jack Flam a number of years ago. And it's mostly made up of conversations and things Matisse wrote earlier in his career. This is much later, as we were talking before. He's 70 years old. Do you think Matisse is being more honest or more insightful later than he was earlier? Do you think that there's a difference for an artist in how he talks about his work later in his or her career than in the middle?
Well, a little bit, because you wanted to save your certain image that you have in the public's eyes, but at the same time, it depends. It depends also the question that people ask you. So it depends what those interviews were about. But I think pretty much he kept saying the same similar things. His life didn't change too much. But in this one is way more expanded. There's a lot more things into it. But if you compare those, it's pretty much the same thing. That's another problem, though, is that artists, they tend to repeat over and over the same thing.
Yes.
And so even if it's not true, I mean, because something happened, but they create this sense, and then you talk about that. And, well, we all do that to some degree, but in the art world, you create your image, and then you believe it, and so you repeat over and over again. But that's what this one was interesting, is because he was not controlling anything here. He was like just waking up and happy to be alive, and so, man, I've done this and this and that. Remember that? He was not controlled. So that was kind of interesting, and that was the problem too.
Well, speaking of Matisse and his image and how he presented it, I didn't realize this until I was flipping pages 2/3 of the way of the book. Who designed the cover of the book?
So but
even
what
earlier.
I wanted to do is like to have this cover, because in a letter, Matisse sent it to Courthion. He sends 2 pages later, and he sends, I would like to have this type of color, and I did a sanguine drawing, and I would like to have it, and I didn't know where it was. But suddenly in the letter, he made a little drawing, actually the way it should look, the cover should look. So then when I went to Paris to the family, and I said, because they have a huge collection, and I mentioned this, and they said, oh yes, we have this drawing in our collection. So
it's in the family's collection.
In the family collection. So we were able to do that, and so this is what he always wanted to have.
He wanted that cover. Do we have any
Why?
Do we have any idea why he liked that particular drawing?
I think it's because
he
looks like he has those eyes, like kind of like on the side like this. He said, "Yeah, I did it, man." Kind of, He's and he has a little mustache, little beard, but he's smart. He looks very smart. A little bit too smart for.
He loved to draw himself with glasses.
Yeah. Well, he loved all kinds of stuff. I mean, birds, animals, and
Oh, that was an amazing passage. The birds. I had not realized the extent to which he considered himself a collector of birds. I mean, there are lots of birds and bird cages in the paintings, and pop psychologists have had fun with that for decades.
But he had a big, like a vivary, we call it, vivary?
Or an aviary, yeah.
Yeah, aviary. And so with all kinds of different birds, and the problem during the war, he didn't have anything to give them to eat, and a lot of them died.
Yeah.
So he was very sad about that. So they were collapsing. But I had something that I wanted to talk about in this one here that I think is quite interesting. About the role of the artist, or how he saw himself as an artist. He said, I learned that Orientals, I think it's the Japanese, and I think it's the Goncourt who reported the fact. The Japanese used to change names several times during a lifetime, so they would not spend their whole lives trapped by what they had done. And he says, I don't understand that at all. I'm so single-minded that I feel the need to show people the whole road I've traveled. That's why he did this interview. So that they are grateful for the effort I made, right? Even if it hasn't borne the results I was hoping for. But the trajectory for him is quite important stuff.
And in a few years after he says that, he goes out of his way to exhibit photographs of paintings in process with the finished paintings, so that he can show that even as he was saying it.
Right, yes. And also not only that, but sometimes he did a series of prints in progress, so that he could sell them all, not only one. You can sell the entire process. So
yes, well, no fool.
That's smart.
No fool. He needed to buy more birds.
That's smart.
Well, let's open it up to questions. I think we have microphones on either side. So,
but before can I say something?
Sure,
because I note something that I think it also talks a lot about him. He says, in the morning, to begin the day well, I have to feel like killing someone. I have things to give, energy, to expand. He says something like that. And for example, he said, a painter on a desert island would not paint. Some people say, for example, some of his friends say, oh, I would love to be isolated and so on. He said, no, you need a public. You need to, again, to express yourself. You want to be recognized. So that's why you want energy to expand, and you want to kill somebody at the beginning of the day. And after that, at the end, you feel kind of, because you killed it, but symbolically through the picture, right? So, that's why he says an artist is an exhibitionist. Take away his spectators, and the exhibitionist sinks off with his hand in his pocket. So he stops, So, just to show you how complicated the man was, right?
He was. There are points in the interview where you can almost hear Courthion thinking to himself, "Do believe this? Am I being put on?
Right, yeah.
Is there a bit of a show going on here?
But at the same time, Courthion had a lot of problem because he was manipulating too much Matisse at some point, and that's why the book in the end was not published, is because a lot of his friends, Matisse friends and family, first of all, they thought Courthion was not on the level of the master, and it said that very specifically, and so they say, well, he's being manipulated and he's not worthwhile. So.
Questions? Oh, down here? Oh, could you wait for the microphone? Sorry.
Could you speak a little bit more to Matisse down in Collioure with Mayol, to know a little bit more about his relationship to the sculptor?
I think I don't know enough about that to talk about. You mean that after the war or before? Before the war?
Before Matisse, before Mayol passed away, of course.
Right. Well, yeah, but I think he had always a kind of a nice connection, a relationship with him. It was like, but of a reverence, he was like, he knew that he did nasty little things with a collaboration, but to him, and I think he mentioned that, to him that's not enough, because he says that everybody were confronted with the same situation. I mean, you could not, it was a catch-22 at that time. So he accepted the fact that this old man, already pretty old man, was like trying to survive, and he did something that he didn't understand what he was doing. And Picasso said, no, he understood very well. So that was the debate. But I think Matisse always thought that he was the greatest artist in France.
Throughout the interview, Matisse expresses great respect and admiration for Renoir, Rodin, and then the third one is Mayol.
And you know what is interesting is that even now in France, I mean, the collaboration has still not been integrated into our culture, right? It's still a very hot topic. And for example, we have a gallerist who did a kind of retrospective of Mayol's work. She's part of Mayol's family, and it was a big battle in the press and against that. So it's still. Recently? Oh yeah, maybe 5 years ago. Yeah. No, that has not been resolved yet. Still, I mean, it's still kind of. And the Algerian war, nobody talks about, period. So it's kind of an interesting problem, and that's why I brought in the Picasso fight, because it was understood right away. I mean, those days, and Vlaminck was really the one who took it all. I mean, Vlaminck really. But Cocteau, the same way. All kinds of artists, Arletty, and all kinds of artists. They were acting during when the Nazis were in Paris. Some of them were more than others. And so, but how do you define and so on? At least they were not killed at the end, because during the a lot of discussion went on. I don't know if you have seen photographs of the liberation, but the women who had, for example, a boyfriend who was a Nazi, they were all shaved and shot but also attacked in the streets and so on. And what was kind of horrible in that situation is that in villages, for example, if you don't like that person for years, or you had your several families thing, you would do it, and it was not true, but too late, right? So they didn't know how to handle this. I mean, the situation was quite weird, wild.
Others? Yes.
You mentioned there was a couple issues that Matisse might have regretted being overly candid about, such as the description of America, but it seems that those things might have been just cut from the interview. Why do you think Matisse suppressed the entire publication itself?
The what?
Why do you think Matisse suppressed the publication of the entire interview?
But because he knew he was going too far. I mean, he was exaggerating a bit, and also he thought that that was not. You don't say this about another country or. I mean, he took it out, all of it. But and Samba too, he was describing this woman as she does not understand anything. She's kind of wild. She's gross. She is the way when you talk. He used to talk on that in this interview as when you talk in France on the café, right? You have on the terrace and you have your beer and a coffee and you talk, you chat. That's what he wanted to have.
And in fact, they were chatting over beer and coffee.
Yes,
for
that's
much
right.
of it.
That's
yeah.
right. And they didn't. That's why he didn't want to have. At first, they wanted to have another title, like a more serious, discussion avec Matisse. No, it's just a chat. But then, when he reread it, he said, oh God, that's a little bit too far, right? So maybe he didn't want to do that, and also maybe because he didn't want to have the Barn Foundation to say, oh.
Do you think that Matisse also thought that it was improper to reminisce on the glorious past at a time when France was occupied?
Yeah. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure, because he's really... So something that I learned also by reading this and also talking with the family is that he didn't give a damn about anything. I mean...
At this point, in 1941?
All through.
All through.
I mean, that's my desire, my pleasure, that's what I want to do. And in a sense, it's interesting because if you bow to the other pressures, and so you become a slave. And so that was the idea of the avant-garde. The hell with that. No, I'm going to be me. And so that's when we end up at the end with a me generation, in a sense, right?
Because
but that's part of the anti-establishment kind of practice.
Because this moment of 1941 and Matisse's relationship with the Second World War, he'd been through one, it's probably useful to kind of note a little bit of Matisse's family history with the resistance, Amélie and Marguerite, and what happened in 44 and 45 and how Matisse found out about it.
Well, it's not very clear actually how he learned about it, but they were on the resistance, and through France they had a network, right? But at that time he was divorced with his wife, so he was.
But in 44, Marguerite was captured.
He was, yeah. So he was like very afraid about his daughter. So and she escaped going on a train to Germany. She escaped.
She was on a train on the way to Germany where she was going to be shot or killed, presumably,
right.
and the train is bombed.
Yeah.
And goes off the rails,
right.
and she's able to escape and make her way back to France, which is
so
a
he was
remarkable
surprised.
story. He's stunned. Other questions? It's on the way. I guess maybe I should also note that Marguerite was Matisse's daughter, not with Amélie. Marguerite's mother was not Amélie, for what that's worth. But yes.
This interview actually came about because of his publisher, Albert Schira,
Yes.
who was Jewish, lived in Geneva or Lucerne. And he came to Matisse when he was, after his operation, that he was ill, realizing he had this stomach muscles removed or badly damaged. He could no longer stand at an easel and paint. So Albert Schira offered to Matisse to write or to publish his memoirs. So that's how it originally came about.
Right, yes.
Then Matisse began, because Courthion was sent by Matisse, by Albert Schira, to Nice to do the interviews, and he did several interviews. And Matisse began to realize, at least from the research that I've done, is that he didn't want to have his memoirs published because his life was over at that point, and it wasn't. He wanted to continue to paint. So he worked from his bed and then from a wheelchair. He had a very productive 13 years.
Very.
And Albert Schira published a series of prints that Matisse was reading the poetry of Ronsard, Pierre de Ronsard. So he published that first series, which took 7 years because Schira had to leave France because he was Jewish during the occupation, plus other problems they had with the publication. But that's what happened, and that's what Matisse ends up with as continuing the productivity of his work.
But that was a deal that Matisse made with Schira. We're not going to publish this book, this interview, but you can have these. So that was the deal that they made. But the fact that Matisse didn't want the book to be published is because he mentioned that he was not really all himself when he was doing the interview with Kira and with Courthion, because he were under the influence of drugs and all that stuff. And so all his family, in particular Rouvert, who said that too, but in several letters to Matisse, he said, well, this guy is no good. But I think that Rouvert wanted to do something like that himself, and that's why they were all pushing. And then Matisse has to go 2 weeks later to his psychologist and doctor who operated him to ask Wertheimer to ask him a letter to explain that he was out to lunch and he was totally out and so on. So we have a discussion about, is it true? Was it or not? I think it was not. I think it's a kind of an excuse that he had to find out because he was pretty clear-minded. I mean, he was not under any drugs or whatever. But that was the excuse that he had to say no to this process. And you know why? It's because it seems to me when you go to the archives of the family, you realize that what Matisse wanted, first of all, he hated the way Courthion organized the interviews, because the interviews was kind of, let's chat about this and that, So, but then he said, okay, Courthion, being, I guess, Swiss or a critic, an art critic, let's classify. So here, all about the trips, here, all about the dance, here about... And Matisse hated that, because he lost all the direct impulse, right? The reality of the discussion.
The texture, yeah.
The texture he lost. So they wanted to do, so in the archives you see, let's put this block here and this and then. And so you have literally thousands and thousands of typed pages with all kinds of writing on it. And in the end, it's a mess. It's a complete mess. You cannot recuperate it. And so the only document that we had was that one that was done by Courthion, this way, classified like this, but they were never able to reformat it. And so that's why the family thought that they had the definite interview, but it was in a mess. And we said, no, the last one that was ready to go to Skira is this one, because it says on it, right, that it's a document that is binded, and the others are pages that are flowing all around the place. But I think it's two problems. The family thought that it was not well done by Courthion, and Matisse thought that Courthion didn't do a good job on organizing the flow of the discussion. And then you have to find an excuse, because he signed a contract already, right? We have a contract and so on. I mean, Courthion had a contract, and at some point, Matisse didn't want to have the word Courthion on the cover. So we have a letter from Courthion to say, excuse me, but I mean, I did all this and I spent 6 months. I mean, come on, okay, we'll do it tiny. So he said tiny, stuff like this. So the battle was all there, all through.
One of the fun things about this publication is that it reproduces a number of these pages from the archives, which you can see are typed pages and then just handwriting all over them, massive rearrangements and attempted rearrangements.
Right, and what I like is that we managed to do, thanks for the Getty, but to have a facsimile of some of those pages with the writing, but also in those days you would cut and paste, right? So you would cut a piece of paper and glue it on top, so you can see all this stuff. And very often you can see, I always pronounce her name pretty badly, but
Lydia.
Lydia is actually adding a few things, a lot actually, on the side. It's not even Matisse. So you recognize Matisse writing, or here he said that, and then you have Lydia, a secretary, who writes like a paragraph in a very approximative French, by the way, kind of very strange.
She was
stuff.
Russian. She
was Russian. So very interesting stuff. So in a sense, it's a real mess, I tell you. And they didn't know how to handle it. And even the family now, they don't know how to handle it. But it's fascinating to go and look at it and so on. And I go back maybe to talk a little bit, to conclude the force of the archives. I love archives, but you cannot trust them either, right? It's not because you cannot trust the artist, you cannot trust the archive because you don't know if another letter was there and lost, contradicting what you have. So you always have to be very careful about this. And even the text, I keep saying that even an archive that you have, you cannot swallow it in a sense. I think you have to do some torture. You have to torture it in order for the real sound to come out, because you cannot trust the thing. I mean, that's what is fascinating, though. That is why doing that type of work, you feel like you are a little bit like Sherlock Holmes, without the drugs. because you have to keep your mind kind of clear and.
Any others? Up here?
Does Matisse have a reference to when he visited the Alhambra in Granada, in Spain?
No. Not in the book, no. No. He doesn't mention Spain.
I was just going to say, yeah.
No, just at the border, but he does not, no.
Collioure, which is in the book a lot, is a driver and a 9-iron away from Spain.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Collioure in the book,
yeah,
for obvious reasons, but not much Spain.
No.
Oh, maybe a little bit about Seville. The Seville, yeah, when he visits Seville and makes the two paintings, the two still lifes in Seville that end up in Russia.
Oh, maybe.
He does talk about those. But that's more about how he was bored in Seville and needed something to do, made 2 paintings, sold them to Russia, and that was really helpful to him to eat. Oh, down here.
I do. Can I speak without the microphone?
Oh,
it's a nice one, I hope.
It's here we go.
Right.
I'm not quite sure that I understood Matisse's attitude toward American collectors. The reason I ask this is that I was a student of Dr. Barnes in the late 40s and early 50s.
Ooh, see, I
and
knew,
Dr. Barnes gave us to understand that they were great friends. Matisse was very happy to come and do the mural there. And when he did it the wrong size because he was given the wrong dimensions, he was more than happy to do it over again.
Yes.
So I wanted to know what was the actual relationship.
Well, no, because that's work. That's what you have to do. You have a client, so you do whatever. But that doesn't mean that behind the door you say, "Oh God, that guy's a pain in the neck." I mean, this is also for him. It was, and actually, it's more the Rockefeller group, right?
Well, he does
because the dinners and so on, he was involved in.
He does tell one story about Barnes where I don't know if Matisse is telling the story about Barnes visiting him in France or Barnes visiting a friend of his in France, but Barnes walks into an artist's studio and sees a Renoir on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
And says, "Oh, it's a Renoir. How many artists, Henri, whichever it was, how many Renoirs do you have?" And the artist probably goes, 5 or 6. And Barnes goes, "Oh, I have 300.
Yeah.
So that's
so
quite
that's
a point
a
of
type
story.
2, actually, and just 200.
Yeah, but I mean, he's.
But he said, he was puffing his chest
all
out.
of them. See, it's a battle of egos, right? All this stuff is about that. So when you write about this, you have to take that into account. And but again, because of the story, it's interesting because it's like if you are listening to somebody behind the door, right? It's like this document here is like that. It's like a history. I don't know, internal history or close to gossip, right? That's what you want, chatting. It means a little bit gossips. That's about. But some gossips are good, and some others he felt a little too far. So I'm going to read. I'm going to not allow to have that for everybody to know.
We mentioned there was a lot of Renoir and Malleol in the book, but who's really not in the book is Cézanne.
One time.
Matisse only discusses Cézanne once.
Yeah,
and it's kind of, I think, when they're talking about.
But Cézanne would be more the interest more to Picasso than to Cézanne, so that's why he's not there. Right?
Although he does, I guess, which maybe makes it slightly revealing, perhaps, that I think when Matisse brings up Cézanne, he talks about how Cézanne's portraits of his wife were kind of dowdy.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
that's the thing he noticed.
Yeah, he was right too.
He was. Well, Serge Guilbaut, thanks so much.